Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Leaderboard. I'm Efren Salinas, subbing in for Meg Turney, and I'm joined as always by our esports expert, Jared Wynn.
That is me. That's who I am.
That's you, buddy.
Yeah, you got the name right?
I'm Efren.
Yeah, that's a good follow-up to what Meg does. She gets my name, you got my name, you're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's almost as if, no, we definitely want her back.
Yeah.
Well, Jared, one of the biggest teams in League of Legends made waves this week with a potential roster change. Team SoloMid announced that Keith McBrief will be trying out as AD carry, with the potential to replace longtime player Jason Wild Turtle Tran. Jared, that kind of sucks. Getting replaced?
It might suck if he gets replaced. He still might stay with the team. That's not a sure replacement. In fact, I doubt Keith plays a game this split for TSM. I think this is more of a motivational tactic for him, for the team, rather. They told Wild Turtle and Dyrus around the time of MSI that they needed to step their games up. Dyrus, I think, is done, though. He's played pretty well in the top lane in this split for TSM. Wild Turtle has not had quite the same new beginning, if you will. He's still kind of putting himself out there too far. He gets caught out. He's overly aggressive at times. He's a very flash-forward player, which is not necessarily the best thing to be these days. So I'm not sure what his solution is going to be. I don't know if he's going to be able to pick his play out because he certainly has Keith looking over his shoulder. And Keith has shown himself to be at least a serviceable ADC at the LCS level. I think Keith will next year in a new split perhaps find a more permanent home. I don't think TSM is that permanent home. I think, again, it's just a motivational tactic for Wild Turtle. I'm not sure it's going to work. I look for it to work because, I mean, Lustboy is a great support, as you know. He's your favorite support, I know, from talking to you about that before. So you want to have a bottom lane with Lustboy work out. You want to have that playmaking ability put to use. Is it going to be put to use with Wild Turtle to its fullest extent? I'm not sure. Plus, the team is still going to carry around Bjergsen. He is the guy on this team, and they're not going to change it up just for Wild Turtle's sake, I don't think. So we'll see. I think he should play better at some point to some extent and have like a better showing. I'm not sure it's going to be good enough for TSM to be able to make a good run at Worlds, for example, which is their goal, without a doubt. But they did win IEM with the same lineup, so, I mean, it's possible. We'll see.
Does this set a precedent? Now other teams are going to start employing this motivational tactic?
Well, that's the thing. We saw Team Liquid do the exact same thing. They brought in Keith McBrief to motivate, quote-unquote, Piglet, their new ADC imported fresh from Korea, and it worked out great then. Piglet has played very well for Team Liquid since getting benched. He saw the team win without him, and he was kind of like, well, I guess I got to make some adjustments here to my ego, and also just settling into the United States. He was a new import from Korea. He had some problems apparently with homesickness even when he was in Korea, much less going to a new continent and having to play there. So it is a tactic that's been used before. It's using it here again. We'll see if it works to the same effect. Well, I'm not sure it's going to be used to quite the same effect as it was at Team Liquid, but it could be. It's possible.
Keeps things exciting?
It does, of course.
Of course, and I mean, there's not enough exciting in the game, right? We need the drama.
It's especially exciting for Wild Turtle, I'm sure, having a player looking over his shoulder. Like, he's got to be super pumped about that. Just so excited,
Jared, there's a new player in the esports scene.
So I've heard.
A new esport organization known by the name of Renegades. They're notably co-owned by League of Legends analyst Christopher Montecristo Michaels. In League of Legends, the team will boast the former Misfits lineup, while in Counter-Strike, Renegades will be represented by the former Vox Eminer squad. Is this a new force in esports?
It could be. We'll see. Misfits is a solid Challenger Series team. Not quite in the League Championship Series yet, but they could be. They probably will be. They've played quite well there, so I expect them to make the big jump. If the current lineup stays composed as is into that, we'll see. They've made some plays for some big names. We actually had some controversy with their owner making some plays for players like Quas and doing so, perhaps not in the legal framework that Riot establishes for their owners to work in. So this is going to change a little bit as this situation develops, which has just dropped today. We'll see how that goes. The Counter-Strike team, the former Vox Eminor, a solid group. They're the first Australian team to really make a big impact internationally. I predicted, in fact, on this very set, not quite this structure, but on this set, that Vox Eminor were going to make a charge earlier in the year, and they did exactly that in the spring. They made their names known, they made their play known, their style. Now they're going to try to take the next step forward and actually be a contender on the world stage. It could happen. It's going to be a process for them. They got to be more consistent, but it could happen. This is a good first step towards that. So I do think the former Misfits is part of this team, as is the former Vox Eminor. I do think Renegades is a solid organization in theory. Whether or not it works out in practice, we're going to find out. I think Montecristo is a great guy to have helping run your team. The question is, what's the conflict of interest there with him being an analyst for the OGN broadcast of the LCK, the Korean League of Legends pro scene. We'll find out as well. There's a lot of things to find out here to let develop over time. Let kind of breathe.
Jared, I read Montecristo's AMA, and I was struck by, the first thing is like, hey, well, this is the industry is still marred by mismanagement and taking advantage of players.
Yes.
And he's gonna right all those wrongs.
Right.
Is that big promises?
It is a big promise. Whether he can deliver it or not, we'll find out soon, I guess. He's going to put his mettle to the test for our benefit, and then we will surely commentate on it as such. That's our job to do.
I know I will.
I will.
Jared, FaceIt. You familiar with them?
I will face it. Oh, the organization. Yeah.
FaceIt has now partnered with DreamHack to add some prestige and, more importantly, some money to the next big event for both tournament organizers. This means that DreamHack's upcoming Counter-Strike tournament in Valencia will be richer and will also serve as host to FaceIt's playoff round. What do you think brought about this partnership, Jared?
Well, it's no coincidence we see this happen not long after we saw ESL and ESEA partner with their own Super League. Well, Super League in quotation marks. The real Super League never really came to fruition. But we've seen ESL throw their weight around. We've seen actually FaceIt show that they can do some things independently. I think ESL's made it kind of known, though, with their size and their strength, their gumption, the recent buyout, the money involved there, that they can do pretty much what they want to do. They added teams to their ESL, ESEA Pro League without telling the teams and the organizations, and the teams weren't going to drop out because of it. They weren't going to complain. What can you do? ESL's the power player here. So I think when you see FaceIt and DreamHack link up together, it's a sign of these organizations have to communicate better and have to work together better in order to potentially counter the ability for an ESL to completely dominate the space. I think we're going to see more cooperation like this in the future as ESL continues to flaunt and show its strength and throw around its weight. Whether this cooperation goes anywhere in terms of like long-term deals or more structured arrangements as we have with ESL and ESEA in that partnership between the European and North American leagues and Counter-Strike, for example, we'll find out. But I definitely think we're going to see more communication and more cooperation, again, because of ESL stepping up and showing, we are this strong, we can do what we want to do, more or less. Mm-hmm. You can't let the bullies just push you around, Efren. You can't do that. You got to stand up for yourself.
I once stood up to a bully.
How'd they go?
I went home with a bloody nose.
FaceIt and DreamHack might go home with bloody noses, but they'll be stronger for it. They'll have more gumption in the future, and gumption is very important in esports.
You know who has gumption?
Who?
ESPN. ESPN's inroads into esport have never been more clear. The sports media giant has now played host to or broadcast tournaments for Counter-Strike, Dota 2, Call of Duty, and Heroes of the Storm. And if that weren't enough, the latest issue of the ESPN The Magazine was centered around, you guessed it, competitive gaming? No, esports. It's the same thing.
Yeah, Faker had a big story. Faker, the mid lane god of Korea. So ESPN getting involved in esports, certainly they have been for a while now, but I think it's being taken up a notch here because we saw not one but 2 games at X Games recently. We're going to have more international coverage of the international on ESPN. We're going to see, we now see an esports issue of ESPN The Magazine. In fact, I went to a barber recently, and in the little magazine rack, the freshly read magazine sitting next to me was the esports issue of ESPN The Magazine at my barber. It was such a meta moment for me. I really felt like I had arrived as I was waiting to have my hair cut. That's when I knew ESPN is taking esports a little more seriously than before. And how can you not? You have the viewership, you have the money, the revenues, the people, the demographic. It's all there. It's waiting for the taking. So I'm not surprised. We're not going to see them dive in head first, though, because we still have the president of the company saying esports is not really a sport, it's just a competition like chess or checkers. We still have divisive figures at ESPN, at the company, saying, we're not so sure about this thing. So I think it's going to be a measured approach. But it's just like I made the comparison in an article I wrote about this to MMA. You can't deny the popularity and the loyal attitude of the fans. And eventually you have to, acknowledge that and give time and attention to the subject. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing them do exactly that. So as competitive game becomes more and more of a thing and a bigger thing, we're going to see more companies like ESPN acknowledge that with their own time and money. So not a surprise.
But the thing is, do we need ESPN for that? It's been blowing up. Am I going to watch it on TV? Why? I'm watching it on my Twitch stream.
We don't need ESPN for that. In fact, that's the big thing here. ESPN, I think, is a sign of how you have in niches like esports, which is hardly a niche anymore, this need for validation. Like, the big players already established are paying attention to us now. But it doesn't really matter if ESPN's already established. You're establishing yourself anew with online streaming on services like Twitch, now YouTube gaming coming into the form. You're establishing yourself as new and different. So you don't need the old hand, the old player to acknowledge you, but it still feels kind of good on some level.
It does.
Yeah, it's like,
sure.
Okay, the guys, the old white guys in black suits, they're saying we're okay now. And you don't want to acknowledge that it feels good to hear that, but it does feel kind of good to hear that. It feels kind of good to see your what you like validated. It's just a natural thing. So that's where I think that comes from. It's just a business thing, though, for ESPN. It's a business matter, and it should be a business matter for the organizations, the leagues, the teams, the developers and publishers of the games who might have the rights interacting with ESPN and other broadcasters in the future. Now we're going to see Twitch and YouTube splitting rights, I'm sure, for different exclusivity of different games, different leagues. So all of this stuff's kind of coming to a big head. You might even see in the future ESPN as a competitor to Twitch or to YouTube, a direct competitor to those services, which is a strange thing to think about, but that's, I think, where we might be headed.
If you want to know more about ESPN's involvement in esports, you should read Jared Wynn's excellent article at dailydot.com.
Wow, good plug there. Very natural segue. I appreciate that. Yeah, I like that.
You know, you validate me, I validate you, buddy.
I appreciate the validation here on the leaderboard.
That's right.
That's what we're all about.
Speaking of the leaderboard, it's coming to a close. I'm Efren Salinas.
I'm Jared Wynn, as you heard earlier.
That's right. Thank you for joining us.